Dorian Gray, he didn't have a portrait problem. What he had was an accountability problem. Oscar Wilde wrote a book in 1890 about a beautiful man who figured out how to keep his public face perfect, while everything that he actually was rotted somewhere private, where nobody could see it. And then we invented social media and did the exact same thing, except we call it a brand. Wilde saw us coming by about 130 years, and I think we owe it to him to talk about that today. Hi friends, I'm Bettie Rage. Welcome to Lashes and Lore. And if you're new here, we tell dark stories. We dissect the lore that other people gloss over, and occasionally I get genuinely unreasonable about fictional men who literally had every chance to do the right thing and really just didn't. And before we get into it, I want to show you something. This pile of yarn that you see here, this used to be a sweater. It's a project that I've been building and working on, and every single scrap came from a thrifted sweater. Something that was on its way to a landfill until I pulled it apart. And over the next few months, while I tell you these stories, we're going to be making some sort of Frankenstein blanket with all of this. So if you want to chat with me more about the blanket, you can either get into the comments or pop over to my free Patreon, and I like talking about stuff there too. So there's a link for that. But you got to come back each week and find out what the next blanket square looks like until we put it all together one day when I decide there's enough for an actual blanket. And then you can help me decide what to do with it when it's done, because I genuinely haven't thought that far ahead. Right, so back to Dorian Gray. Before we get into the novel, you do need to know about the man who wrote it, because the biography is inseparable from the book, and honestly, it makes the whole thing hit a little bit harder. Oscar Wilde was Irish, born in Dublin in 1854, and by the time that he published his novel in 1890, he was the most famous wit in London. We're talking about a man who could walk into a room and make everyone in it feel simultaneously delighted and slightly stupid. So that's the stuff that heroes are made of. He built an entire public philosophy around the idea that beauty mattered more than morality. Where am I? Yes, we do blanket and speak and read my notes all at the same time. It's a format that I chose. So let's keep crocheting and talking about the story. He built an entire public philosophy around the idea that beauty mattered more than morality, that surface was substantial, that the aesthetic life was the only life worth living. And he didn't just write about it, he performed it constantly, publicly, with absolute commitment, which makes what he wrote in his book either very brave or very reckless, depending on how you look at it. Because in 1895, 5 years after Dorian Gray was published, Oscar Wilde went on trial for gross indecency. And the prosecution didn't just bring witnesses, they brought his novel. They read passages from it aloud in court as evidence of his corrupt character. The book he wrote about the cost of vanity and the hidden life became the weapon. He was convicted. 2 years hard labor. He came out broken, bankrupt, and in exile. He died in Paris in 1900 under a fake name 3 years after his release. The man who understood the danger of the curated self better than literally anyone who has ever lived got taken down by his own portrait. And you cannot make that up. So let's talk about Dorian Gray. And if I sound like a frog, it's because I got COVID last week, and I have been lying in bed not well for a while. Let's talk about Dorian Gray. Published in 1890, expanded in 1891, the only novel Wilde ever wrote. And honestly, the audacity of writing one novel and having it be this novel, like, ugh. If you're a writer, you get it. Like, gee whiz. It opens up in a London studio with an artist named Basil Hallward. And Basil is completely obsessed with a young man named Dorian Gray, in a way that artists get obsessed with a subject, where the beauty of the thing feels almost unbearable to look at directly. He has painted his best portrait literally ever because of Dorian Gray. And he knows it, and it actually frightens him a little bit. And into this studio walks Lord Henry Wotton, charming, cynical, brilliant in a way that people are brilliant when they've never had to live with the consequences of their own ideas. You know one. He takes one look at Dorian Gray and immediately starts talking about youth, about beauty, about how these things fade, how they're the only things that matter, how a life spent chasing sensation is the only life worth living. Bold take, but okay. He says it all so elegantly that it literally sounds like philosophy instead of poison. And Dorian, who is young and beautiful and has never been told literally anything different, 100% believes everything that this man has to say. Because why wouldn't he? So Dorian looks at the finished portrait, this perfect image of himself, and something shifts. He makes a wish that the portrait would age instead of him, that he could stay exactly as he is forever, and that the painting would carry the weight of time instead. And the crazy part, which I'm sure you've already figured out, is the wish was granted. Nobody signs anything. There's not like a devil at the crossroads where he sells his soul. It just happens. And let me tell you, that's kind of like terrifying when something like that happens and you don't even notice that you've made the deal. Nightmare fuel. But from there, Dorian does exactly what Lord Henry suggested. He pursues pleasure without limits. He ruins Sybil Vane, a young actress who loves him genuinely, discards her when she stops being interested, and resolves to reconcile when he feels a flicker of guilt, and finds out that she is already dead. Prussic acid. He was too late because he waited too long, which is kind of the most Dorian Gray thing imaginable. He accumulates secrets. He murders Basil. When Basil finally confronts him with what he's become, he moves through London society completely untouched, charming and beautiful, and above suspicion because he looks innocent. Meanwhile, locked in the old schoolroom at the top of his house, a room that's meant for childhood innocence, which, if you're looking for symbolism, Wilde's not really being subtle here. The portrait gets worse. Every cruelty, every betrayal, every act of cowardice etched into the painted face, while the real one stays absolutely perfect. He visits it in secret, hating it, but needing it. Then, at the end of the book, he decides that he is going to destroy it. He takes a knife to the canvas, and the consequence, which was always his, comes back to him all at once. They find him old, ruined, and dead on the floor, and the portrait perfect once again. And it gets a little uncomfortable here because Wilde described in 1890 the exact architecture of every social media platform ever built. And I don't mean that as like some kind of cute observation. I mean it like structurally. Yeah. And I work in social media and marketing, so I feel like I have a pretty good idea of this. The portrait is your feed. It is the curated surface that the world sees, frozen, perfect, maintained with tremendous effort and zero acknowledgement of the effort. Dorian doesn't walk around London looking corrupt. He walks around London looking like his profile picture, and everyone responds to the public profile picture because that is all they have been given access to. And the attic is everything else. The anxiety behind the highlight reel, the relationship that's literally falling apart while the couple's photos go up, the burnout behind the productivity content, the body dysmorphia behind the fitness journey. The portrait in the attic knows what's going on, and it's keeping record. You just made sure that nobody else can see it. And Lord Henry, well, he is the algorithm. Think about what Lord Henry actually does in this novel. He does not force Dorian to do anything. He just feeds him a philosophy that flatters his worst impulses and then steps back and watches. He makes hedonism sound like wisdom, and he makes cruelty sound like sophistication. He accelerates Dorian's consumption without ever showing him the cost. Does that sound familiar to anyone else? I mean, it should. That is the feed. That's the engagement loop. That's every single platform ever designed to show you exactly what keeps you scrolling without ever asking you what it's doing to the thing behind the screen. And the detail that I am stuck on with this story is Dorian couldn't throw the portrait away. He had every opportunity. He could have burned it, sold it, destroyed it, like 100 times over. He locked it in the attic and visited it, like in secret, because somewhere underneath all of it, he needed to know, like, what actually was accumulating in there, what actually was going on. And we do the same thing. We know the performance isn't the whole truth. We know the gap between the feed and the attic actually exists. And most of us check on it more than we actually admit. It wasn't the portrait that was the problem. It was the authority that Dorian gave it. The same thing applies to the feed, the For You page, the thing that keeps you scrolling. You gave it the power to tell you what you're worth. And then Oscar Wilde had the audacity to write down what that costs. One of the most genuinely interesting things about this book is that Oscar Wilde wasn't writing science fiction. He was writing about Victorian London, about drawing rooms and dinner parties and the very specific social performance of being seen. In the right places, of course, and by the right people. And somehow, in doing that, he described with absolute precision something that would not exist for like another 130 years. Because we didn't invent the curated self. We just scaled it, roided it up, and put it out there. And every generation of people have had its own version of the portrait, the painted miniature that only showed your good side, the carefully worded letter that omitted the embarrassing parts, the dinner party persona that bore a loose relationship to the person who went home afterward. Humans have always known how to maintain a surface, and we've always known how to perform fine. And what social media did was just industrialize it. It gave everyone a canvas, an audience, and an algorithm designed to reward the most compelling versions of the performance. It made the portrait not just possible, but necessary. And you don't have an attic anymore. You have a grid, and that grid has metrics. Dorian's tragedy isn't that he made the wish. His tragedy was that he was so committed to the surface that he lost the ability to be witnessed honestly by anyone, including himself. The people who loved him, Basil, Sybil, even Lord Henry, none of them got to see what was actually happening to him. He was too good at the performance. And the damage didn't disappear because it was hidden. It accumulated. Every cruelty compounded. Every consequence deferred made the next one worse, until the portrait in the attic was so far from the face that he showed the world that there was literally no way back. We know this story. We've watched it happen in real time. The influencer whose carefully constructed life turns out to have been held together with like nothing but like Elmer's glue, which is water soluble. So that's not a good thing to hold anything together with. The persona that was thoroughly maintained, the person inside it stopped existing. The attic that nobody saw until suddenly everyone did. Okay, I have a tiny little tabletop detour because I play D&D and I can't help myself and I don't want to force these in every single time, but I think this one kind of works. Okay, just stay with me because, you know, there's no official Wizards of the Coast stat block for Dorian Gray, although they should do that. But the fan community has been building him for like years, and they've almost universally decided that he is a warlock, and honestly, they're right. A warlock's power comes entirely from a pact with an external patron. The patron grants the abilities, the warlock defers the cost. Sound familiar? Okay, so the portrait is the patron. Dorian did not sell his soul to the devil. He just signed a warlock pact with his own vanity and then spent the rest of the novel pretending the terms really weren't real. So every warlock at every table has done something similar. And don't say you haven't. Come on now. But like usually with worse dice rolls. So probably already feels like I've been preaching to you and that I've already settled my mom moment of this entire episode. However, when I started building this episode, my gut was saying for the mom moment, it would be about aging gracefully at, 41, just embrace who you are and don't worry about being young and youthful. But that's really not what the story is about. I was going to go into detail. We're sold this idea that we're getting older and it's something to be managed and filtered and minimized. And all of that is true and it is worth saying. But the more I sat with this book, I realized that aging gracefully really isn't the actual point at all. Dorian didn't fear aging. He feared being seen. And those are very different things. Aging is just time doing what time does. And then what Dorian couldn't tolerate was the idea that the accumulation would be visible, that someone would look at him and know what had actually been happening. God forbid. That the gap between the surface and the truth would be legible on his face. Again, God forbid. And I think that is the more honest thing to sit with because I have had versions of the portrait and I think most people have. Not vanity exactly, more like a very practiced version of fine. A way of presenting that was well maintained, that even the people closest to me were working from the curated version of me and the attic was getting crowded. The thing about Dorian is that he knew. He visited the portrait. He saw what was accumulating in it. And he just decided that keeping the surface intact mattered more than dealing with what was underneath. And every time he made that choice, it got harder. And what finally breaks Dorian Gray is not guilt. It's the moment that he tries to do something genuinely good, one small actual act of decency, and he goes to check on the portrait. And it's worse because the motivation of this was vanity. He wanted to feel like a good person without doing the work of actually becoming one. And the portrait, which had been keeping honest records all along, knew the difference. And I think about that a lot. The difference between performing okay and actually being okay. The difference between wanting to seem like you've dealt with something and actually dealing with it. The portrait always knows. But the question is just whether you're willing to go up to the attic and look at it honestly. Dorian never was, and that is what killed him. So, a man who figured out how to keep his face perfect while everything he actually was rotted somewhere private. A man so committed to the surface that he lost the ability to be witnessed honestly by anyone, including himself. A man who visits his own truth in secret, in the dark, and then locked the door behind him every single time. Oscar Wilde wrote him in 1890. Wilde lived him in real time, and then Wilde's own portrait, the novel he wrote about the cost of curated self, was carried into a courtroom and used to destroy him. The irony is so complete that it almost feels staged, but I don't think it was. But here's what you keep coming back to. At the end of the novel, when Dorian finally goes after the portrait with a knife, he thinks that he is destroying the evidence. He thinks that if he can just get rid of the record stops being real. And as he finds out, the consequence comes back to him all at one time. Everything he ever deferred, everything he outsourced, decades of it, it's the last thing that he ever feels. And you can't stab the portrait. You can filter it, curate it, lock it in the attic, and throw away the key. But it's keeping records, whether you look at it or not. Oscar Wilde Saw Us Coming by about 130 years. The least that we can do is look at what he was pointing at. And if you want to read the primary source, the picture of Dorian Gray, it is widely available. I got this one at Barnes & Noble. And it's a lot shorter than you think. And it's probably more devastating than you would expect. And here is our little square that we finished for the blanket this week. It's got little glitters in it. It's pretty. This one's really drapey. I'm not sure how this whole thing is going to come together one day, but it's going to be a story. And you know I like those. You should comment the word Dorian below, and I'll know that the algorithm is actually behaving itself for once. Maybe. Thanks to everybody who always puts my comment words in. It makes me feel real good inside. Thank you. And if you just can't get enough of me, you should check out this video right here. I'm Bettie Rage, your favorite nerdy goth mom, and this was Lashes and Lore. Be good to each other, love each other, make good choices, and as always, free mom hugs from me to you. Bye.